This lecture covers the basics of creating a simple Revit macro. Revit macros are created by accessing the Macro Manager button on the Manage tab of the Revit user interface. Once in the Macro Manager dialog, we can create macros either specific to a single Revit RVT project or macros that are accessible to any RVT file on your computer. The first step will be to create a new module, which we can give any name. Choose the language, which can be C#, VB.NET, Ruby, or Python. We'll choose C#, and then optionally enter a description. Revit will then launch the Sharp Develop environment. Sharp Development is a programming environment that is tightly integrated with Revit, making it simpler for the creation of macros. If you're thinking about a macro as something like a Excel macro where you press a record button and the program automatically captures your interactions through the user interface, Revit macros are something different. In Revit, the macros are a way to access any of the API functionality in a way that's tightly integrated with your Revit session, which removes some of the technical complexity that would otherwise be necessary. After creating the macro module, we then can create a new macro inside that module. I'll call that macro simple dialog. And again, want to note that we're working in the application tab so that this macro will be available for any RVT file on this computer. We then can return back to our Sharp Develop session, and we can see that some code has been created for this new macro called Simple Dialog. At this point, we should have the Revit API help file available. You can get this either through the standard Revit install, where it can be found in a location on your computer like this, or the files can be downloaded from the Boost Your BIM website at this URL. Here we are inside that help file, and in the index we can search for the task dialog class. The task dialog, as it explains, is a simple dialog box that can display information and receive input from the user. If we look at the members of the task dialog class, this shows us how we can create and interact with the task dialog. We will use the simple option that takes in two pieces of text, which are called strings in C#. One piece of text will be the title on the dialog, and the other will be the main instruction inside the body of the dialog. So, returning back to Sharp Develop, you can type task dialog, then a period to access a member of that class. Then in C#, the syntax will be an open parentheses, a double quote. We'll now type in the piece of text for the title. Close that string with another double quote. Enter a comma to then enter the next input, which will be the body of the dialog. Another double quote to close that. A close parentheses to match the open parentheses at the beginning. Then a semicolon, which is always used in C# to end any line of code. We then go up to the Build menu, click Build Solution. You can see in the Output tab at the bottom that the build finished successfully and that there's no errors listed. We can then return to the Revit dialog, select that simple dialog or the entry, click Run, and our macro is created. The dialog has the name of our module at the beginning It has the title that we specified. In the first piece of input to task dialog show, and the text for the body of the dialog as specified as well. That's your first macro, and more will come in subsequent lectures.